You know, Larry, you are right. Over the weekend, I think it became clear that the Benghazi story is no longer ignorable. And right now on the phone, we have Joe DiGenova, our legal analyst. But it's a special good guest to have today because we now know that Joe will represent one of the three so-called whistleblowers who will testify later this week before Darrell Iss's committee that is investigating the Benghazi matter. Hello, Joe. How are you this morning?
Good morning, guys. Great to be on.
We'd also mention that your marriage and legal partner, Victoria Toensing, will represent another of these so-called whistleblowers. You represent a guy named Mark Thompson. Who is he, and what do you expect him to say when he testifies later this week?
Well, first of all, let me say that it is an honor and a privilege to represent these individuals. They are American heroes. They are the sentinels who made clear on the night of September the 11th, 2012, that everything that was being done by the government was wrong. These folks have risked their futures, their well-being, their jobs, in the face of incredible resistance from inside the Department of State. It is safe to say that when all is said and done, if the American people wake up and if the media does its job, that these individuals will be singularly responsible for making sure that the historical record of what happened on that night and in the days and weeks thereafter will now be set straight, so that the true culprits inside the American government who try to cover up will be named, and the details about their incredible activities will finally be made public. I'm honored to represent Mark Thompson, who is the Deputy Coordinator for Operations of the Department of State Counterterrorism Bureau. And let me just say that as a courtesy to the committee and as well as to my client, I am not allowed to, because of the rules of the committee, go into precisely what he is going to say. That is for the hearing on Wednesday. But I can tell you this. Once the testimony is done on Wednesday, the story that has been put out by the administration, even though anyone with a brain knew that the story put out by the administration was false, by the end of the hearings on Wednesday, after the assaults by the Democrats on these witnesses and attempts to undercut them, it will be very clear that these are three great Americans who are trying to rescue this country from the sleepwalking that it's in. It's just a remarkable bunch of people, and I can't tell you, you guys and all of the WMAL listeners, that it is an honor to represent them for free. We are charging them no fees, wouldn't even think of it, because this is about history. This is about making sure that people understand that on that night, September the 11th, 2012, the United States government abandoned a United States ambassador and all the people in that compound. And if it weren't for the bravery of some CIA people who basically disobeyed orders not to protect people, there would be more dead. This is an amazing story of venality inside the White House, the Department of State, and regrettably, the Department of Defense. It is a story of such immensity that it makes you sad that something that we call the American mainstream media can even get up and look at itself in the mirror these days.
Joe, there have been some reports that Mark Thompson, your client, will testify that he was locked out of the process, and he was supposed to be one of the people who was supposed to initiate sort of a counterterrorism review of what had happened there, and that he was frozen out. Can you confirm at least that report?
Let me just say that it is really important that these guys get a chance to tell their story through their own voices. And I apologize to you and to the listeners about that. I can tell you this. They are going to testify truthfully and fully and tell everything that they know. They have absolutely no reason, unlike many people at the Department of State who have much to hide and have hidden it for months. Remember, as we were told by Jay Carney, this happened a long time
That's right.
ago.
6.5
Remember,
that happened
why
such a long
in
time
the world
ago.
would any decent American care about whether or not these facts ever come out?
Yes.
I'll tell you why they should care. Because there are people dead today who should not be. We may not know whether or not if everything had been done that could have been done, the 4 Americans could have been saved. It's highly unlikely that Ambassador Stevens could have been saved, given the facts and circumstances of the attack on him and others around him. But it is quite obvious that the 2 CIA guys who were killed on the top of that annex by mortar shells most definitely could have been helped by other people. This is an amazing story, and when you think about this, just remember there are so many facts that are so remarkable that it makes your blood boil. You recall this Accountability Review Board, which was set up by Hillary Clinton under a federal statute for the Department of State to quote unquote determine the facts and circumstances. This review board, led by Ambassador Pickering and Admiral Mullen, did not even interview the Secretary of State, a central player, that evening and thereafter. Now, can you imagine?
Well, Joe, it was the Accountability Review Board, so clearly she has no accountability. She's not accountable for any of this.
Can you imagine if this had been a Republican president and a Republican Secretary of State?
Special prosecutor, joint committee hearings, the whole 9 yards.
The notion that, if I may borrow a phrase from the president, the notion that you could have something and pretend that it was doing an independent investigation and then purposely avert your eyes from the head of the department and never question her.
Yeah.
If anybody thinks that the Accountability Review Board was designed to find the truth, they are living in a dream world.
Joe, I got to ask you this because the knives are out. Now, you know how this town is. You've been around it long enough. And the spokesperson for State Department, Patrick Ventrell, I believe his name, he was asked specifically about the charges that you and your partner and wife, Victoria Toensing, made last week. Listen to his response on Friday.
We're now aware of Ms. Toensing.
Well, you were aware of that because she was on TV, right?
And now she's been in touch with us directly to go about the normal procedure.
She was lying.
I'm saying she was making false statements, so that were unfounded, that we were...
Making false statements is lying, isn't it?
We think that
right?
False statements are lying, Matt. And so we had somebody who was on national television saying that we were blocking them from getting a security clearance.
That's appropriate
which was not true.
For an officer.
There you go, Joe. You and Victoria are lying. I need you to respond.
Well, this is a very simple thing. Mr. Ventrell is doing what they all do at the Department of State when they can't do anything else. They put out false information. The Department of State was sent a letter by Chairman Darrell Issa on April 16th, and then again when they didn't respond on April 26th, specifically requesting the process by which private attorneys could get security clearances. They did not respond. They only responded after we said publicly that we could not get information about our clearances. Only then did they answer Darrell Issa's letter and provide a contact point for getting the clearances. When I made my phone call over to the Department of State to get my clearance to start the ball rolling, and I spoke with a woman in the employment division of the legal advisor's office, of all the place to go for a security clearance, she told me, well, we really don't have a process for this. Usually these things come up in the middle of some employment case, and then we make arrangements for people to get a clearance. But in your case, with a congressional investigation, we really don't have a process for that.
Joe.
So Mr. Ventrell from the State Department didn't even know that his own department doesn't have a process for people like us, and they were making it up on the run.
Joe, time to continue our discussion about Benghazi. We've been talking to Joe DiGenova. Joe, did you find your wife?
He did indeed.
There she is. Victoria Toensing is on the line now. Victoria, thanks for joining us. Now, you are going to represent Gregory Hicks, who was the #2 diplomat in Benghazi at the time of the attacks. And there have been a lot of reporting over the weekend about some of the things that Gregory Hicks is going to say. Among other things, he's going to say that from the very first moments, he knew that this was an attack and not some demonstration that spiraled out of control. What else are we going to hear from your client?
Well, again, just like Joe, some transcripts are being put out there, but I'm just not going to discuss it until we have the hearing, and because I want to listen to the hearing.
Is it fair to say, though, that what we're going to hear from this guy is going to be rather eye-opening and a very different narrative than anything we have heard in the past?
I have said all last week when I was complaining about not getting the process, the clearance process through, I have said what my client is going to say directly contradicts what the White House and the State Department put out.
Victoria,
and you can see it by that quote. I mean, they knew that nobody called the embassy in Tripoli before Rice went on TV for 5 shows. They didn't check. I mean, if I'm Susan Rice, I've done enough television. I want to say, hey, let's just talk to who was on the ground and make sure this is correct.
Well, and the quote that just hit the front page of Breitbart News is that when he saw Susan Rice talking about the YouTube video on those Sunday shows, famously now, he said his jaw hit the floor. He couldn't believe that that's what she was saying.
And, you know, I have known all this for about a month. And, of course, have said nothing until it was appropriate. I cannot tell you how surprised I was when Chairman Issa sent the request for the attorney clearances, and it was ignored.
Yeah.
Nobody even picked up the phone and got back to him. And then that State Department jerk comes on and says that I'm making false statements. They had 2 letters in their department requesting that we get clearances. Now, let me tell you the status on the clearances. Here it is. We got notice on Friday afternoon after we had each filled out a 42-page form, and we did that within 24 hours. We got notice on Friday afternoon that we had temporary secret clearance, which, of course, is not sufficient to talk to our clients about everything that's going on. We need top-secret clearance.
So still the runaround.
Still the runaround.
And, well, 42 pages. It could have been worse. It could have been the form for Obamacare eligibility, Victoria.
But hold on, that's important. You say you've been given temporary secret. What is the difference between secret and top secret, and what does it mean in this case?
Well, it means that I still can't talk to my client about all that went on.
Because you can talk about some of it, but not all of it.
Right. It's still keeping the bulk of the classified information from me because I called him right after we got that temporary secret and asked him.
Victoria Toensing is our guest now, and she represents Mr. Hicks, Acting Ambassador Hicks from Libya, who is going to be one of the whistleblower witnesses in front of Darrell Issa's House Oversight Committee. And let me ask you, I know you can't get into the specifics, but based on what you know about your client's testimony as a whistleblower, stepping back and looking at the entire picture of the Benghazi story and the aftermath and how the administration and the State Department handled it, as well as the Accountability Review Board that Hillary Clinton instituted, do you think, looking at it now, that this is more than just a political problem for the president and Hillary Clinton? Is there any illegality here that you can see?
Well, I want to start. It's illegal to prevent people from giving information to Congress, and they have been doing that. I don't know all the documents that the staff has seen, but if anybody in the State Department did not turn over fully all the document requests, that would be an illegality. There are a number of possibilities. But, you know, it's not going to be even a political problem unless the mainstream media really starts to pick this up now. I was delighted to see CBS did a great job.
Yeah, you had Bob Schieffer say it looks like a cover-up at the State Department.
My mind was blown away watching that. It was journalism at its finest.
I agree. It was tremendous. One of the things that that is happening here is that it is finally getting to the point where it has become unignorable. Do you sense a change in all that?
Yeah, but it's really taken a long time to get to critical mass.
Sure has.
And never overestimate the mainstream media's ability to ignore something when it's politically expedient.
Well, Victoria Toensing, we will watch with great interest on Wednesday when your client testifies before Darrell Issa's committee. Thank you. And
you're going to have my friend Eli Lake on.
That's right. He'll be on a little bit later. And by the way, pass on again our thanks to Joe DiGenova, your legal and marriage partner.
Okay.
Thank you and Joe for keeping Mornings on the Mall the place where you break these very important tidbits.